Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. Chaos ensues as guns and stun grenades are fired to control crowds outside Kabul airport. British soldiers race against time to evacuate UK citizens from Afghanistan. The Met announces that over £50 million was spent policing environmental demonstrations and warns that protests over the next 2 weeks will cause disruption across the capital. And we speak to the head of Cornwall's tourism board about the influx of tourists to the area as more people opt for staycations. As British soldiers race to evacuate UK citizens from Afghanistan, chaos continues outside Kabul airport. Guns and stun grenades are employed to control the crowd. NTD's Costa Menes brings us this report.
British troops help UK citizens flee Kabul airport on Friday. Large crowds of people also attempt to get on planes. Military evacuations continue, but airport access is difficult. At a nearby Taliban checkpoint, crowds of people sit on the floor. Some wave British passports. Outside the airport, even more are trying to get in. There's chaos as guns are shot in the air to control the crowds. Stun grenades are fired to hold back large groups.
I'm telling to the people, stay in their houses, do not come to this area. It's a very, very crazy situation right now, and I hope the situations get better because I see the kids are dying. It's very terrible.
On Thursday evening, a British plane carrying evacuees from Kabul transited in Dubai before departing to the UK. Defence Minister James Heappey says over 960 people were evacuated between Thursday morning and Friday morning. He tells Sky News the UK is looking to deliver similar numbers on Friday, Saturday and the days ahead. But he says it's not clear how long this evacuation plan can last. Heappey says the UK can't get everybody out, but British soldiers will get as many out as possible. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab defends the government's handling of the Afghanistan crisis. He says the rapidly deteriorating situation there prevented a call being made to Afghan ministers while he was on holiday. He also says prioritizing security at the airport was the right approach so that UK citizens and Afghan staff could evacuate. Raab is under pressure to resign after it was revealed that he was on the Greek island of Crete as the Taliban took control. Costa Menes, NTD News.
A British businessman was stranded several days in Kabul airport without food and drink. We hear about his last-minute escape after the terminal was looted. NTD's Eddie Aiken has his story.
A British businessman managed to leave Afghanistan this week with the help of the German military. The man, who did not wish to give his name, fled to the airport along with thousands of others after Kabul fell on Sunday.
It took me a good few hours to get myself close to the gate and shout myself out and saying that I'm a British, please get me out of there, here. So one of the soldiers just called me. As I said, it was a chaos. They had guns, they were shooting. They had no choice but to, move the crowd from there. So I understand that. Tear gas was firing all around. So one of them just got me inside, and I was in tears, honestly.
He says people panicked after they heard the Taliban took over the airport.
So all the staff at the airport, including the pilots and those who were issuing the boarding pass, the cleaners, everybody left. And there were like hundreds of people, not just from Britain, from Germany, from the United States, from all around the world, including Afghans. We got stranded there.
He says this started a long wait, with a more chaotic scene inside the terminal.
So we were there for a couple of nights without food and water, and a night after that, ordinary people, they started coming into the airport without passports or anything. They looted the airport, the terminal. They broke everything that was in there, the computers, the canteens, and we were scared.
Finally on Wednesday he got on a German flight to Uzbekistan, arriving in Frankfurt on Thursday. He is thankful to the German military. Eddie Aiken, NTD News.
German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle said today Taliban militants hunting one of its journalists in Afghanistan have shot dead one member of his family. It said the Taliban had been doing a house-to-house search to find the journalist. Deutsche Welle said the Taliban had raided the homes of at least 3 of its journalists. Some Afghan journalists have also reported having been beaten and their homes raided since the militants seized the capital, Kabul, on Sunday. The Taliban had promised it would allow free media when it gave its first news conference on Tuesday. And in London, police warn that protests by Extinction Rebellion planned for the next 2 weeks will cause disruption across the capital. That's after £50 million in taxpayer money was already spent policing them. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us the latest on this from New Scotland Yard.
The Metropolitan Police today revealed policing protests by the Extinction Rebellion environmental group has cost the taxpayer more than £50 million since 2019. Commander Rachel Williams says the figure covers the Met's response to 3 prolonged demonstrations where activists camped in the streets. The Met made what they called an unprecedented number of arrests, nearly 3,800. And the 50 million figure is expected to rise considerably as fresh action is planned. Extinction Rebellion says it will target London's financial district in protests from Monday. This comes ahead of climate talks involving world leaders in November. Commander Williams says she is in no doubt this year's policing operation will run into the millions. Police warn today the protests will cause disruption across the capital and distract officers from dealing with crime. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist says the police share London's outrage on the impact this activism had on their businesses and their communities. He urged Extinction Rebellion to consider the consequences of their actions on the people and communities of London itself. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
The foreign ministries of Britain, Germany and France expressed grave concern over the latest UN report on Iran's nuclear production. The International Atomic Energy Agency say Iran continues to produce uranium metal used in nuclear bombs. The production of uranium metal is prohibited by a 2015 nuclear deal. The deal promises Iran economic incentives in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. It is meant to prevent Tehran from developing a nuclear bomb. Britain, Germany and France call the moves by Iran serious violations of its commitment. And in other news, UK cinema box office receipts for the month after most COVID restrictions were lifted in England are half of their pre-pandemic level. Major films have been released, but demand for big screen entertainment has a long way to go. NTD's John Robson brings us the details.
Cinema box office tracker Comscore says takings in the 4 weeks after so-called Freedom Day on the 19th of July was £65 million in the UK. That's compared with £129 million for the corresponding weeks in 2019. Chief Executive of the UK Cinema Association, Phil Clapp, told the BBC, "The conditions remain challenging, there's no doubt about that." He says there is reluctance among older audiences to return to the cinema. Clapp says no one expected things to bounce back immediately. Box office analyst Charles Gant says in 2019, 13 films grossed more than £20 million in the UK. But this year, despite some major blockbusters, there's been none. The top-ranked release in the UK for last weekend was the film Free Guy, which grossed only £2.5 million on its opening. One of the next big blockbusters, James Bond, No Time to Die, is scheduled for the 8th of October. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
There's been an influx of tourists to the southwest as more people opt for staycations. The head of Cornwall's tourism board says he's looking to cut levels of summer tourism and hopes visitors might instead come in the winter. NTD's Jane Worrell brings us this report from Cornwall.
Travel restrictions abroad mean in Cornwall it's a busier summer than usual. Visit Cornwall says there's an extra 20,000 tourists. It's welcome business for locals with mixed views on the influx of visitors.
I think a lot of people are very worried about the COVID, but in my eyes, if they're worried about COVID, they shouldn't be here. The local people, again, some are worried about COVID, some weren't. Some people have been let down last minute with restaurants because they've closed because of COVID or whatever. A shortage of staff as well has been a problem. But generally speaking, everyone's fitted in somewhere.
The amount of people has put a strain on the local area with congestion on the narrow lanes and pressure on the health service.
August is normally busy anyway, but this year I would think we've had more people than ever. Generally, I think people are happy with the situation, but we are a little bit overcrowded at the moment.
Meals out on holidays were booked months in advance. Visitors here felt lucky they had a spot.
We had an evening meal the other day, and people were queuing up behind us thinking they could book for the next day, when in fact probably they should have booked 6 months ago.
We came last year and almost immediately I booked for this year because I knew that the properties were going to go just like that. I think everybody's sort of trying to be as mindful of each other as they possibly can. I think when you're out in the open, you feel a lot safer.
This year we've noticed it's been extremely busy compared to the years that we've been before. It's almost unbearable to walk round the shops here. It's just too many people, I think, in a small area.
The head of Cornwall's Tourism Board is looking to reduce numbers of visitors over the summer. This may include controversial new rules around property lets.
So your job is to attract tourists to Cornwall, but would you be looking at turning people away?
It's a rather bizarre world I've lived in the last 18 months. Visit Cornwall was the first tourist board to say don't come. That was on about the 19th of March, ahead of the first lockdown. Since then, we've actually had more of a visitor information, visitor management message. Our advice is if there's must things you want to see, please, please, please book those ahead of time, or else you might be disappointed. And our final message this summer is, can we have a message, sort of summer of understanding? I understand the pandemic is still here. Please take the precautions. Understand that restaurants might close because of this pandemic at short notice and disappoint you, and that the staff that are working in often understaffed places are working really hard. Please be a bit respectful and understanding. Everybody's doing their best to make the best holiday you can, but there are levels where you'll be frustrated. But can we just please relax and enjoy holiday, and bottle up your frustrations and don't take it out on staff?
And what kind of plans do you have in place in terms of sustaining the levels of tourists coming in?
I think what we should take this year is a bit of a sort of warning light going off. This is not the experience that the people of Cornwall want. It's certainly not what Visit Cornwall wants. And it's not been actually good for that many visitors at times. So we really got to understand that our normal level of visitors, which is about 180,000 in any one day coming in and staying, is the top level. We can't go to 200 plus too often because that's where we are now. So we are arguing and lobbying, and the government are looking at a licensing scheme, and we want to pilot that in Cornwall next year. Not a licensing scheme, it's a registration scheme, which means that anybody renting out a house or accommodation must be registered, and then they would actually receive all the information they need to know they're safe and compliant. Because we do believe a lot of people are letting quite short lets for 2 or 3 weeks. And those properties will not be up to the safety standards required. There are potentially 72 rules, regulations and laws you have to abide to. So we feel that if we had a licensing scheme, firstly, we could keep people safe, but it would probably reduce the amount of people letting.
So that would affect the entire year, I guess. Were you looking to target the busier months because it's very much comes in waves?
Yeah, 46% of visitors come in July and August, and only 1% come in January. Cornwall's a wonderful place in the winter. Our new strategy is about we've got to contain August and maybe even reduce it. But that gives great opportunities, marine wildlife, wildflowers and the cliffs and everything else that's wonderful in the early spring. Lots of activities around cold water swimming you can do all year round. So our plan going forward is to actually hold the summer and reduce it, and then build winter trade. And there's lots of opportunities for that now with the older population, even older than me. Then there's couples that are working together in the house that need to get away because they've lost the sanctuary they used to have. And then there's sort of old new markets of what they call the workation, where people can take a week off, come down, take a cottage in the winter, and still go on the odd Zoom call or the odd Teams call and have that odd meeting while still having a holiday. So there's a lot of opportunities to build tourism in the winter that weren't there a few years ago. And we want to capitalize on that because it'd be good for the economy, extend jobs, and actually just good for people to experience a rather special time of year in Cornwall, which is the winter.
Some may be looking at booking their next staycation. With months of trade lost during the lockdowns, businesses will be hoping for sustained levels of tourism to continue. Jane Werrell, NTD News, Cornwall.
Still to come, German Chancellor Angela Merkel made her final official trip to Russia for talks with President Putin. It comes during a low point in the relationship between the two countries. That and more after the break. German Chancellor Angela Merkel flew to Moscow for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier today. It's her final official trip to Russia, and it comes during a low point in the relationship between the two countries. And please be warned, some of the footage contains flash photography. NTD's Eddie Aitken tells us more.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel held talks in Moscow on Friday with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
In principle, we are at the lowest point in German-Russian relations. It only gets lower every year.
Despite their political differences, the two longtime leaders managed to hold up a line of communication over the years. Merkel grew up in former Moscow-backed East Germany and speaks Russian. Putin was based in Dresden during the Cold War as a KGB officer and speaks German.
I think what she has earned with Putin, and it's mutual, is respect. So this test with the dogs, relatively at the beginning of her chancellorship, was a test, so to speak, also of how resilient she is.
Putin angered Berlin in 2007 by allowing his Labrador into a meeting with Merkel, who has a fear of dogs. He later apologized, saying he didn't know about Merkel's phobia. The talks between two of Europe's longest-serving leaders coincide with the first anniversary of the poisoning of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Navalny was flown to Germany last year after being poisoned with what the West concluded was a Russian-made military nerve agent. Relations between Merkel and Putin soured in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine.
The big break was Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where there was basically a loss of trust, where Putin lied to Merkel, that Russia had nothing to do with it, that there were no Russian troops there, which he later admitted again. And I think that was a deep disappointment for Merkel.
The conflict is one of several that has severely strained ties.
This alienation has something to do with the fact that Russia has become an authoritarian regime, that it is no longer semi-authoritarian, but fully authoritarian, and it is no longer interested in improving relations with the West.
Merkel on Friday said among the topics to discuss are Afghanistan, Libya, as well as bilateral relations. This visit to Moscow is likely to be the last one for Merkel as Chancellor, as she does not run for office again until next month's national election. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
French authorities say firefighters are still struggling with the French Riviera wildfire. But the blaze is finally slowing as winds and hot weather decrease. NTD's Joanna Robson has this report.
A fire that ravaged forests near the French Riviera this week is slowing as winds and hot weather subside. But local authorities said firefighters were still struggling to get it under control on Thursday.
A total of 1,200 firefighters have been mobilized over the past 3 days. Around 7,100 hectares have been burned, which represents an enormous area in the department of the Var, placing the fire among the 5 largest destructive fires in the south of France for hundreds of years.
At least 2 people have been killed and 27 injured since the fire started Monday. At least 10,000 have been evacuated. Strong winds off the Mediterranean had fanned the flames, but are now calming. In the Gulf of St. Tropez, huge water bombing planes were dumping water across the flaming Riviera backcountry. Reinforcements to firefighters came from other parts of France. Wildfires this summer have left other parts of Europe in smouldering ruins. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Now, what connects James Bond, the Duke of Wellington, and a taxi driver? NTD's 88 Ken brings us the answers to a 60-year-old mystery.
Saturday marks the 60th anniversary of the dramatic theft from the National Gallery of Goya's portrait of the Duke of Wellington. Photographs of documents relating to the crime have just been released as part of the story. They include a reward notice from the Metropolitan Police, a handwritten ransom note, and a statement on the gallery's position following the ransom demands. In July 1965, Newcastle-upon-Tyne taxi driver Kempton Bunton confessed that he had taken the gallery's painting. Bunton had sent ransom notes saying he would only return the painting on condition that the government invest more in care for the elderly, specifically for pensioners to receive free television licenses. But following a high-profile trial, he was controversially found not guilty of stealing the picture. The theft was referenced in the 1962 James Bond film Dr. No, in a scene in which the painting was on display at Dr. Julius No's lair. The portrait is currently safely on display at the National Gallery. The story gets further airing as the film called The Duke is scheduled for release next year. It stars Jim Broadbent and Dame Helen Mirren. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Tourists are returning to the Italian capital in large numbers. Even enormous queues can't put people off one of Rome's most visited attractions. NTD's Joanne Robson has the story.
Tourism is on the up in Rome, and so are the queues. Italy is open for business again after being the first European country to shut down travel in 2020. A large queue snakes through the narrow streets to one of the capital's most popular attractions, the Pantheon.
There is only one Pantheon in the world. If you want to see it, you have to go there and wait. Otherwise, take a book and read it at home.
Popular with tourists, the stunning Pantheon also attracts locals. They want to see where popes and Italian kings are buried. Before accessing the ancient monument, people have to display their green pass. It shows whether they received a COVID-19 vaccine. These tourists from Austria have been queuing over an hour in the heat.
Yeah, it's our last day, so we wanted to visit the Pantheon. And yeah, because it's the last day, we can't miss out the opportunity. So we decided to get in line. It's okay. Yesterday we waited 2 hours for our COVID test, so...
Italy generates 13% of its economic output from tourism. Over 19 million people visited the capital in 2019. The Italian Federation for Tourism expects 15 million to visit Rome this year. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
And finally, an ancient tradition is being brought back to life on the island of Crete. Visitors are getting hands-on learning about cooking methods and dishes of the Minoan culture. NTD's Joy Duguid has the story.
Geraldine Morrison makes a Minoan feast on the Greek island of Crete. She has spent 25 years studying the food and cooking methods of this ancient civilization.
The Minoan civilization is considered a Bronze Age civilization, which is prehistoric, and we don't have written records that includes like how they were cooking, what they were cooking, like a cookbook, let's say. And so one of the things we do is we look at the archaeological material and decide what they had.
Carbon-dated ceramic shards, some containing actual food remnants, hold key clues in Morrison's study.
So we look at bones, seeds, and shells, and food, basically, like what we excavate and dig up, and the specialists identify them. So what we're going to prepare today is basically based on food that was either farmed, foraged, trapped, hunted, or fished.
Morrison shares her knowledge of the ancient culture with visitors, cooking in Minoan-style pots over open fires.
Not put too much liquid in it.
One of the participants is Melissa Berlant, who teaches ancient civilizations in the US.
I love the fact that she takes the ancient ingredients and the ancient tools and brings them to life. And really, like, especially as a teacher, you want to form those connections for the students and make them see ancient people as real people.
After several hours of preparation, Morrison and her guests enjoy the Minoan meal of rabbit, pork and lentils.
I thought that the pork shank was amazing because it had fresh and dried figs inside, which is something that I've never experienced before.
The Minoan civilization lasted from 3000 BC to 1100 BC on the island of Crete. It had a profound influence on Western politics, technology, art and philosophy. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.